Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work on NBC Sports on Twitter, Sheng_Peng, and Blue Sky, Sheng Peng. Today, you'll see, once again, I'm writing solo. Keegan is on vacation, and we have a very, very big show today. A lot to talk about. A lot has happened since our last show. Our last show was a bit of a draft recap, free agency preview. Obviously, free agency has happened, and a lot has happened in the last week, like I mentioned. So some of the things that we are going to touch on today, we are going to talk about some of the big news. William Eklund's extension, Thomas Bordeleau gets traded, a little bit prospect scrimmage, free agent signings, obviously, and additions via trade and waiver too. And the main thing we're going to focus on today, though, is we're going to talk about project the Sharks lineup right now, which is, I know, very, very early, July 7th. So too early, really, but still just kind of fun to play around a little bit. And there are reports that the Sharks are looking for a winger. Actually, Mike Weir said that. And reports that the Sharks are looking to trade a defenseman. And so we'll kind of put that together and talk about Sharks' possible lineup for next year and what are the Sharks defensemen worth. But before we get to all that, we have a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor, Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. And go to Bring Hockey Back for the best t-shirts, best Sharks t-shirts. They have a Macklin Celebrini t-shirt, Mac Attack t-shirt. They have a Joe Thornton, Director of Vibes t-shirt, which I'm sure you've seen around. I'm wearing my favorite Bring Hockey Back t-shirt, the short shirt. Shorts. Anyway, go to Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. Coupon code San Jose Hockey Now for 15% off. They also do custom hockey jerseys there. So hockey jerseys for your adult league team, for a corporate event, whatever, you name it. They do that there too. They do great hockey jerseys. So anyway, go to Bring Hockey Back, bringhockeyback.net. Coupon code San Jose Hockey Now for 15% off. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to take a breath here. And we have a lot of topics to get to. Now, again, the main thing that we're going to talk about today is kind of projecting out a Sharks lineup. And also, too, what are the Sharks defensemen worth? There's a report out there, multiple reports out there. David Pagnotta and Elliot Friedman both said that the Sharks are looking to trade a defenseman, which makes sense. They have a lot of defensemen right now. And so I canvassed a bunch of scouts around the league to kind of get a sense of what the Sharks defensemen are worth. And I will tell you that in a second after I drink some water. Anyway, first, though, let's talk about William Eklund's extension. So William Eklund, he signed an extension 3 years, $5.6 million AAV, which kicks in 2026-27. Now, I think the number that really caught everybody's attention is that this extension was just for 3 years and not the maximum 8 that it could have been. And that's interesting, too, because with the new CBA coming in, too, that the maximum contracts will be down to 7 years. And so this was actually kind of the last chance for Eklund to sign an 8-year contract. But from everything that I've understood, everything that I've gathered from both sides are happy with this 3-year extension. That Mike Weir said they talked about different kind of lengths, right? They talked about 7, he said. They talked about 2. They talked about 5 in between. And they settled on 3. And I think that this is a little bit of both sides kind of waiting to see more from each other. The Sharks are waiting to see if William Eklund is a maximum player, a player that they want to give. Well, it's going to be 7 years if it comes up in when his current contract, his current extension expires. I think that is 2029. So they're waiting to see if he's a maximum player, if he's a player that they want to sink 7 years into. And I think Eklund, there's a little bit of a wait and see too, because I think William wants to win and the Sharks are not quite there yet. And he wants to see what the front office does. He obviously wants to see how his game improves too. I think that William understands too that there are things in his game that need to improve. And so I think it's one of those things where this is a bridge contract that works for everybody. This isn't one of those things where William badly wanted to sign for 8 years and he's insulted that the Sharks only gave him 3 years, or vice versa, that the Sharks really pushed for 8 years, but William was like, I'm not sure about you guys. Like, I don't want to sign for 8 years, and I'm not even sure if I want to sign for 3. I think 3 is a good, happy number. It's a bridge number for both sides. And what is a bridge to? Is that a bridge toward William Eklund retiring as a Shark, or is it a bridge toward William Eklund getting traded or signing elsewhere? Well, that is, I think, an open question at this point. But anyway, so both sides happy. Let's see how both sides do. And that means, again, Eklund's performance on the ice and the Sharks, the results, and the team that Mike Grier builds around Eklund. Okay, next, let's talk a little bit about Thomas Bordeleau and his trade. Thomas Bordeleau was qualified, which I think some people thought he might not be qualified. But anyway, he is a pending RFA. Obviously, Thomas Bordeleau, Sharks 2020 second-round pick, much hyped back in the day. Actually, it is interesting to talk about Bordeleau and an Eklund extension all together because, of course, you guys remember the days when Bordeleau was a clear-cut number 2 prospect on the Sharks. And I know that there's a little bit of sort of recency bias to say, oh, the Shark system was just weak. But no, Thomas was a very, very good prospect. I would just say overall with this game, actually, I'll get to that in a second, but let's just talk about the trade first. So he got traded for Shane Bowers, got traded to Jersey Devils for Shane Bowers. Shane Bowers is actually a 2017 first-round pick. And Shane has become kind of an AHL mainstay kind of guy. He's not a guy that you necessarily see as having huge NHL potential anymore, even though he was once a first-round pick, because, of course, he was picked in the first round in 2017. And so a lot of fans are unhappy that you traded a player like Bordeleau that still has a little bit of the halo of that hype that he came with. And he is a producer at the AHL level. He was the AHL All-Star. For a guy that isn't as productive on the AHL level. At the AHL level, he is more of a third-line center. But I think a lot of things go into this. And one of the things is that I believe Bordeleau wanted a fresh start. And I think that this is Mike Grier giving it to him. And not as a favorite, but look, there was no spot for Thomas Bordeleau in the Sharks lineup. I don't think that he is a Sharks organization favorite anymore, so to speak. It's not that he did anything wrong in particular, but that they just have other players in mind for spots, for NHL spots now. And so he was going to be lost in the shuffle here. But anyway, that he is a player that, well, someone want to take a chance on him, so you qualify him and you get something back for him. And it's not, again, is it equivalent value? Is it not? Probably not equivalent value. I mean, Bowers is who he is, and he can fill in, pinch in for a few NHL games, but still at a fourth line kind of role. But with Bordeleau, everyone is kind of thinking, oh, maybe he's got a little more upside left. Well, the Sharks, I don't think that too much. And the Devils are, well, let's roll a dice on him because he's a couple of years younger. And if he does hit, then hey, we got him for Shane Bowers. And at worst, he's good AHL depth for the Devils organization, and he's a guy that can come in and swing in and play play higher in the lineup for the Devils if need be, not for a long stretch, for a couple games here and there. And he's got some offense to him, of course. And so it's kind of a I would say a trade for both sides that it's not going to be a very memorable trade if we're being honest. But the Sharks get a little more certainty, I guess, in AHL and even NHL capacity, and the Devils get a smidgen of upside, not a lot, remember, but a smidgen, and they get somebody that can help their AHL team in terms of the scoring part of it. And I think the big part of it is, giving Bordeleau a fresh start. And I think if we look back at Thomas Bordeleau's sort of path with the Sharks, that I think that he was a very good prospect, but this is my view that his game just didn't take leaps from what it was in 2021. Well, of course, everybody remembers his debut and his shootout goal against Vegas to beat Vegas that year. And I don't see his game having grown enough from that point. He showed a lot of flashes in 2021, 22, and a lot of offensive flashes, but the puck management stuff that I think has plagued him throughout his time with the Sharks got cleaned up a little bit there in the last couple of years. But if you look back to 2023, 24, when he got called up at the beginning of the season, and he was still making a lot of those plays that he was trying in 2021, 22, and there just wasn't a lot of growth in his game overall. And I think that's a big part of it, that sometimes you call up a guy, or a guy makes an NHL debut as a 19-year-old or whatever, and he shows so many flashes and just doesn't grow a lot. The game doesn't grow enough. And so that's how I kind of saw Thomas's game overall. And he also had sort of the misfortune of bouncing around between, I think, three different coaches, right? Buckner, Quinn, and Warsofsky, and a couple of regimes there too. Obviously drafted by Doug Wilson, and then Joe Will, and then Mike Greer. And I think too that there was maybe some thought that the 2022-23 season, that he was supposed to kind of be up with the Sharks the whole season. Or I think that's what he thought after he had a promising debut, NHL debut at the end of the previous season, but that didn't happen, and maybe that set him back mentally a little bit. And so he had to kind of push through that, and push through sort of the expectation of, oh, I thought I was going to NHL, and whoops, I'm not there. But anyway, so I think that's a interesting sort of cautionary tale to some degree for the fans, and just a sense of uh, sometimes prospects, they don't take that extra leap, and whatever you want to assign that to, be it the Sharks fumbling Bordeleau's development, or Bordeleau himself just for whatever reason just not taking that leap as a player. But that does happen sometimes, that a guy can come in guns a blazing, as I think Thomas was 19, or maybe he was 20 when he made his debut at the end of the 2021-22 season. But you can come in and show a lot of promise. I think everybody still kind of remembers the Bordeleau, Noel Gregor, and Rudy Balzers line that had a pretty nice stretch there at the end of the season. But anyway, that sometimes that just that extra leap isn't there. And anyway, I think that dovetails to Danil Gushchin. Danil Gushchin was also a 2020 draft pick, a third rounder. And Danil Gushchin, I think, is in a similar position as Bordeleau in terms of, I think a fresh start would be welcome. And so we'll see what happens with that. I do think that Gushchin's value is a little higher league wide than Bordeleau, so he might get a little more back. Not a lot more back. I've said this a few times on the podcast that Gushchin, when he tore up the preseason, this past preseason, he had 9 points, which led the preseason. I think he had a 5-point game too. That there were a couple teams that checked in with me and just asked, "Do you think the Sharks are gonna have him on the opening night roster?" Because I think that at that point there were a couple teams that would have put in a claim on him. However, things change, and it's been a year, and it's been a year of, if we're being honest, and it's not all Danil's fault, but it's been a year of Gushchin being unable to crack not a great Sharks lineup, and not be able to stay in it. And anyway, that value that was there at the preseason last year isn't quite there right now. And so it's not like a deal will be automatic, but I think though that it's going in that way, and probably the best for both sides. Again, that there probably is no future for Gushchin, fair or not, on this Sharks team and how Mike Greer sees it. And in that case, then, but he's a player with obvious talent and some skill. And so it'd be nice to give him a shot somewhere, a fresh start, new organization, and see what he can make of it and hope the best for him. Just like I hope the best for Thomas Bordeleau and hope that he can find his footing in New Jersey. Okay, let's talk prospect scrimmage now. So let's move through these topics. So again, we're going to get to eventually free agency. A lot has happened in the last week. Probably should have recorded earlier. So prospect scrimmage, I just want to touch on really quickly. I wrote a story about sort of NHL readiness, Michael Misa, and impressions on some of the other prospects like Ravensbergen, Wong, McKinney, and Dickinson, and Musty and Houghton, or not Houghton, I'm sorry, Musty and Chernishoff. But as that story notes, and as you can guess, it's really hard to tell when you watch a scrimmage, well, who is NHL ready, who is not. And it's because the competition is not close to NHL ready. So I'm very curious more to see how these guys perform, especially Misa and Dickinson and Musty and Chernishoff in the scrimmages. And not even the rookie tournament either, because rookie tournament is best of best, but at basically the junior level. But when we get to the scrimmages, though, that's when last year, I've told this story before, but last year, that's when I could tell that Musty was a little behind. And not to pick on him, but he's the example from last summer of a guy that was pushing to get to the NHL. And he just didn't seem, even though it was not physical, it was still NHL players at the scrimmage. Legit NHL players. Your Alex Wenbergs, who I've joked before, looked like Andre Kopitar in those scrimmage. No one could touch him. And anyway, Macklin looked like he was a cut above in the scrimmages. His pace, his skating, he looked a cut above. His decision making looked a cut above. But I'm curious to see how Michael Misa will look, how Dickinson will look, how Musty will look this time around, and Chernishoff. So that's kind of when I think I'll have a better sense myself of who is NHL ready and who is not quite NHL ready. And so very curious. And of course, yeah, very, very curious about Musty to see how much his game has grown because he is the oldest of this group that I mentioned. And a little bit about Misa, just a quick aside about him. Still getting a sense of, well, what's going to happen with his contract and that sort of thing, right? So I'm just going to guess it right now. This is just a speculative guess, but sounds like educated guess, I guess I can say that the entire messaging has been he's going to get a chance during training camp. And so I think that leads probably to, if he doesn't make the team, he maybe gets that 9-game trial, see if he's ready or not. That then he probably just goes back to the OHL. That would be my guess because I'm still trying to figure out if he can try out for the team during training camp and try out, but still retain his NCAA eligibility. And so he may not be able to. If you guys don't know, once you sign your ELC, you can't go to college, basically. And that's Sam Dickinson's problem right now. So that's still kind of to be announced, TBD. But I think though that's probably how it's going to go. Though that Misa's going to get his shot during training camp to show that he belongs, and then we'll take it from there and see how good he is. A couple notes about just the other high Sharks high 2025 picks and how they performed during scrimmages or what was said about them. Josh Ravensbergen, the number 30 pick, the goalie. Todd Marchand mentioned that he's a guy that if getting the Bokhoff and Ryan Miller really wanted, really banged the table for. And so we'll see how he pans out. But I think that's always good to hear about the guys that are really banging the table for this guy. Any of these kids, any of the scouts or whatnot, who is really pushing the Sharks to draft these guys. With Wong predictably very raw out there, skating was at times breathtaking for a guy that is 6'6" and so young, but decision making, just actual hockey, there is some work to be done there, obviously, but we all know this, so this is not a really criticism of him. So I think he, as we know, is going to be a project. And if he hits, hopefully he is more valuable than any of the defensemen that go behind him. But it's going to be a lot of patience with him, though. So just have patience with him and see how he's definitely a guy that you could see starting really, really slow with Oshawa this year. But compare his play in November, compare that to how it grows in March. And if you see a lot of growth, then that's what you want to see. And if you don't see a lot of growth, then okay, So let's see. Let's give him this year for sure to see what he can do with Oshawa. And finally, the kind of the forgotten second round pick, Cole McKinney. So Cole McKinney got a lot of praise during camp. John McCarthy said a lot of kind of the buzzwords for when a coach just likes a player, just kind of like he does the right thing. I like him, and so that does sound like Cole McKinney, and kind of maybe why the Sharks drafted him where they did. They took swings with Ravensbergen and Wong at 30 and 33. And with McKinney, they went with sort of the, well, this guy's going to make the league. He may not have a chance to be a first or second line guy. Wong has a shot to be maybe a middle pairing defenseman. Ravensbergen has a shot to be a star goalie. And McKinney may not have quite that kind of upside, but he's going to make the NHL kind of guy. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to kind of shout him out a little bit because he's kind of lost in the shuffle of the Sharks 25, the kind of the top picks, because everyone focuses on Misa, obviously. And Wong is such an interesting story. And Ravensbergen is a goalie, the highest goalie the Sharks have ever drafted. And so little mention of Cole McKinney. Now let's talk about free agency. And Sharks did a lot and didn't do a lot that day. And just kind of a quick recap of it, though. So the Sharks signed Dmitry Orlov to a 2-year. I think the AAV is 6.5. And I know that there are other conditions, trade clauses, that sort of thing, but I don't think we're going to get too much into that right here. Just want to give you kind of a quick rundown of stuff that you already know. They signed defenseman John Klingberg to a 1-year, 4 million AAV. And they signed, or let's stick with the defense. They claimed Nick Leddy. Nick Leddy is also 1 year, 4 million. They claimed him from the St. Louis Blues. And up front, they signed Adam Gaudette. Adam Gaudette from the Senators, 2 years for 4 million. So that's a 2 million AAV. And finally, they took a shot on Philipp Kurashev. And Kurashev, 1 year, 1.25 million. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my Puckpedia to make sure my Orlov number is right. And yeah, it is 6.5 AAV. And also, they traded a 2028 third-round pick for, I'm going to try to say this, Alex Nedeljkovic. And he is going to be Yaroslav Askarov's backup, or sort of his 1B. So that kind of wraps up what the Sharks have done so far as of July 7th in free agency and just adding to the team in general. And so I'm going to talk about each of these players as we talk about sort of the lineup here, the projected lineup. And we are going to get to the rumors out there, or not just rumors, but number one, that Mike Weir is still looking to add a winger to this team, a top 9 winger, he said. And also, too, the report that the Sharks will probably trade a defenseman. And so let's start with that. Actually, let me put up my projected lineup first. Let's see if I know how to do this properly. So bear with me. So Keegan is usually the brains behind the operation. I just talk too much usually. Okay, let's see. I am trying to. Oh, here you go. Okay. Okay, this is gonna work. This is gonna work, guys. I tried this yesterday and it worked. All right. This is my projected forward group. Oh, there you go. I think. Yeah, okay. Technology. Fuck yeah. All right. All right. So this is my Monday, July 7th Sharks lineup. And actually reminds me that I should check my phone to make sure that nothing has happened because you never know what can happen while you are talking your head off on an afternoon and something could have transpired. Nothing has transpired at this moment. But anyway, so this is how I kind of see the forward group. You'll notice a couple interesting things here that I will get to. But okay, so let's start with kind of my first line here. And I want to make this very, very clear that first line doesn't mean necessarily the loading up the Sharks' best players on a line. I try to kind of balance the group out a little bit. Just so I could tell you about each of these players a little bit. They're Sharks new players here and what they kind of prefer, a little bit about their history. So anyway, so once again, this is a balanced lineup. This isn't meant to be just loading up the Sharks' first line. So if we were loading up the Sharks' first line, obviously it would be Eklund, Celebrini, and Toffoli, and not Kurashev. But anyway, so Eklund and Macklin, I probably don't need to talk too much about. You know them well. And I do think that it is really important for the Sharks to get better. If you look at the overall, I mean, you can just take a look at this, right? This is not a strong forward group yet. And it could use, like Mike Greer said, another top 9 winger. And I don't know if it's going to be one of those guys that's left in free agency. I was told that they passed on Jeff Skinner. That's one guy that's a possibility. I don't know if they're trying to sign Roslovic or Victor Olofsson. I have a feeling they're not. That's the sense that I get, but I could be wrong though. So I don't want to kind of say either way on those two. Now we do know that I reported that the Sharks were very interested in Brock Besser and Nikolai Ehlers. And I don't think either of those guys took the Sharks seriously because it's hard to sell a last place team to a top free agent. But I think that gives you a sense though of kind of what they're looking for. And Roslovic seems like a decent kind of plan B if you miss out on a Besser or a Ehlers. But you can also say that, well, let's see what is open in a trade market. And so that'd be my sense that they pass on Roslovic, who probably makes the most sense in this group of the remaining UFAs, that you try to swing a trade. And so there is some chatter that if you look at some of the insiders talk like Chris Johnson and whatnot, that it could be a pretty active trade market this summer because a lot of teams have cap space and there weren't a lot of high-end free agents available. So a lot of teams did not add to their lineup through free agency as much as they'd like. And so it could be pretty active, a lot of movements. And there are also some teams too that are still trying to shed some teams that are trying to shed salary. And so the Sharks may be able to swoop in on somebody there too. And so I think that I'm never a big fan of putting these kind of projected lineups out there because these are just so in the sand, like literally. Like if you're putting out a Sharks projected lineup on July 1st, literally 2 days later, the Mike Greer wave comes crashing in and Orlov and Leddy are in your lineup. And okay, well there goes that, right? So I do want to make that very clear that this is not a final lineup in any sort of sense. And I think that when you look at this as a whole, that you can see that the Sharks still need some top 9 help, I think. I would say on both center and wing, but I'll get to that in a second. So, okay, though. So let's talk about though this first line a little bit more though, and that it is going to be really, really critical, obviously, for Eklund and for Celebrini here to take that next step. Kurashev, I think, is an interesting one. And I put Kurashev here. I look back at some of the lines and lineups. He's a guy that actually can play the left side, he can play center, and he can play right wing. So kind of a nice addition that way, that he is so versatile. But I looked at his breakout season, which 2023-24, looked at Ben Pope's lines, Ben Pope CST, so great beat writer for the Blackhawks, and looked like for most of that season, or more of that season, that Kurashev was on Bedard's right wing. That's where he had kind of the most success. And so that's why I've kind of slotted Kurashev right here. Now, Kurashev is a really interesting case of a guy that had a nice season a couple years ago, 54 points, but it was on a terrible Blackhawks team. And sure, plus minus is not an important stat, but he had a minus 44 that year. So I think he probably was neck to neck with Eklund actually that year for the worst plus minus in the league. I think Eklund won that plus minus title, the minus part of that title that season. But anyway, though, he is a very nice sort of low risk, high reward opportunity right here. And even if he is not, doesn't put up 50 points or whatever, if he can put up half a point this season and be responsible at both ends, and he's got some open ice ability to make moves from what I understand. A little bit, maybe though not the hardest player, but look, you're not gonna find a perfect player at 1.25 million for 1 year. So it is what it is. So, but he's a guy with some skill, some versatility. So he is definitely a good buy low opportunity, buy low kind of gamble here. And so that's why I kind of have him slotted there, give him the best chance possible to succeed. Now, the second line here, I'm very curious about, and it's Graf, Will Smith, and Tyler Toffoli. Obviously, again, like I said, Tyler Toffoli is the clear best right winger on the Sharks, but I'm putting Toffoli here to kind of add balance to this top six right here. So Eklund gets to play with Celebrini, Smith gets Toffoli, Smith gets a shooter with him, and so I think one of the questions about Will Smith, starting with him on this line, is, well, how long is he going to be a center? But for now, though, the Sharks have already said that they want to put him back at center to start next season. And I did find it very interesting. The Sharks kind of, their big fish free agent targets, Besser and Ehlers, these guys are clear wingers. These guys are not center wingers. Now, I don't agree with that strategy. I have talked heads off about should have just re-signed Mikhail Granlund. And Mikhail Granlund gives you that insurance that if Smith is still not quite ready for that center, that you have a guy that can slide right in there in a top six center role and put Smith back on the wing. So Granlund would have been a good security blanket as a equally versatile top six center, or equally able top six center or winger. The Sharks, though, clearly are thinking something different, though, in terms of they want to get winger support for the likes of Will Smith, for Celebrini, for Wenberg, and that's just what they're really focused on. And so, okay, so if that's what they're trying to do, that's what they're trying to do. So far be it for me to say anything more. And I also understand too that Granlund's a little bit older, etc. So it's not a 1-for-1 signing Mikhail Granlund instead of chasing Besser or Ehlers, though Granlund might have come back, as opposed to Besser and Ehlers, who I don't think took the Sharks bid seriously. But anyway, though, that's neither here nor there, though. So that's all in the past now. So, okay, so let's put Smith back on at center. So best chance to succeed there. I think Graf can play the left or right side, but I think he played a lot of the left last year. And Toffoli, Tyler, is a natural right winger, and so I think this is kind of a sensible kind of sort of different skills here. Obviously, Graf can play a little bit more of the defensive role, maybe dig out pucks a little bit. Will is obviously the playmaker, and Toffoli is the shooter. So this could be a functional line. I think for the linchpin will obviously be Will Smith's growth and how much better he is as a center now as opposed to October of last year. Now let's look at the third line now, and you see a very interesting name there as your left winger, Michael Misa. So I have a line of Misa, Wenberg, and Gaudette. So Misa, obviously played center this past year, and he is earmarked to be a center in the NHL. But I think for his first year here, that it makes sense to insulate him, just like the Sharks insulated Smith last year, just like the Sharks in the past have insulated like a Thomas Bordeleau or a William Eklund when the plan was to bring him back or put him back to center and put him on left wing. And left wing appears to be his primary position the last couple of years before his draft year. So left wing is sounds like he is probably more comfortable there on the right wing. And for a guy who was 18 rookie season in NHL, you want to make him as comfortable as possible. And so left it is. And Wenberg, I think, is an excellent kind of duel with him because Wenberg is obviously the veteran, the kind of guy that you want to staple a youngster with. And Wenberg can kind of cover for some of the defensive deficiencies that Misa is obviously going to have in his rookie season. And so I think that's a good blend of sort of abilities there. And if Misa shows throughout the season that he is ready to take on a center load, then okay, great. Put Misa up on second line center and put Smith on the wing. Who knows? But anyway, right now, though, I want to protect Michael Misa, and I think this is the best way to do it on a third line while also giving him still pretty good sort of playing time on a third line. So don't want to put him on a fourth line. I think as long as you're in the top 9, you're getting pretty good playing time. And also, too, he'll obviously be on a power play, too. Now, Gaudette, I think, is a nice fit for if he wasn't playing center in Ottawa, it looked like he was playing right wing, and he's a bit of a shooter, right? He's got a good shot. He had 19 goals last year, and so this is actually a pretty good mix with Wenberg, who obviously we know doesn't like to shoot that much. So Wenberg can try to feed Gaudette, and Misa can help out there. Now, again, we look at this top 9. This top 9 needs help. Let's be honest here, because we don't know what Misa is going to give you. We don't know how ready he is. We don't know what Smith's going to give you yet at center. Graft is a big question mark. And Gaudette is really a stretch as a third liner, for being honest. Oh, Kurashev too. Kurashev is also, well, we don't know what this guy's gonna bring you. So it would make sense if the Sharks kind of blow up my top 9 and add a legitimate top 9 winger. You look at this now, Ehlers or Besser in this group is not going to take the Sharks to the playoffs, but it'll be a way better looking top 9 if either of those names are in there. So we'll see what the Sharks can kind of pull off for a trade, who's available. That's another podcast. I'm not really sure about that part of it, that end of it, who they could be targeting right now. I haven't thought about it, that is. But anyway, though, that is sort of, if you want the Sharks to kind of move out from where they were last year, be better. And I guess that's a question that we should talk about a little later because people are curious. Is this Sharks team better than last year's team? And by last year's team, we're talking about the team that started the season, not the team that ended the season. And I'm not really sure about that. I'm not really sure about that. So last year you had Wallman, you had Blackwood, you had CC, you had Granlund. So I do think the defense overall is better. I like the overall defense. We'll talk about that in a second. I guess I should just wait on that. But anyway, though, is the Sharks team better? I don't know. But they will be better if they add a legitimate winger. I'm just adding that as a topic for us to get to here. So okay. Yeah, too many question marks in his top 9. I'm looking at this and I'm not feeling good. I feel good about Eklund and Eklund taking a step. I feel good about Celebrini. I feel good about Toffoli. I feel good about Wenberg, and that about covers it. I like Will Smith's game a lot, but his success was on the wing last year, so that's why I don't feel as great about him being your 2C at this moment. Anyway, let's move down to the fourth line here. And so we got Carl Grundstrom, Zach Ostapchuk, and Barclay Goodrow, and Ty Dellinger as sort of your 13th forward. And I think Grundstrom is a guy that has some game. I like his elements. He has a good shot. He's physical. He's a willing forechecker. It just didn't come together last year. So hopefully it comes together this year. And there's a place for him in a good lineup. He was a good player for the Kings, a playoff team for a number of years. So hopefully he can find his footing with the Sharks. I like what he brings. Ostapchuk's kind of the most natural center kind of left over. This is kind of the role that the Sharks traded for him to be, and also hopefully to step into the third line role eventually. But for next year, though, I think a 4C is solid for him. And while Gaudreau and Delangelo have played center in the past, that I think that the wing is probably a little more natural, especially for Gaudreau now, who I think is not quite the skater that he was. So wing is a little better for Gaudreau right now. And anyway, so you've got Gaudreau. Sorry, you have Gaudreau on your right side, and we'll see what Barkley can bring this year. So last year was kind of I think a transition year for him, obviously, right? But he was up. I don't think he was as bad as people like to make it out, but he didn't have a great season by any stretch either. And so let's see what Barkley's got left in the tank here. And anyway, if he doesn't have a lot left, that's why you have a younger Ty Dellandrea here. Dellandrea is another guy that, like Brunstrom, I thought that these two additions would work out better for the Sharks, but both guys just lack consistency. When you saw them at their best, that there is something there, but they just couldn't bring it every night. And with a guy like Ty Dellandrea, you look at the game, I think it's a game at Pittsburgh, which I wrote about it. He was incredible that game. And that's kind of thing, well, why can't he do that a little more often? And with Grunstrom, I mentioned sort of the elements I like about his game. And so if that can come together, and Ostapchuk is a guy too, going back to him, that needs some growth. Obviously, last year, actually, I liked a lot of his defensive details. He was really tough to beat one-on-one in battles. And so I liked actually a lot about his game with the Sharks. I was watching him very, very closely you can follow my game notes, right? I was watching him and Kovalenko like exclusively for the last like 5 to 10 games or something like that. And he's a guy, Ostapchuk, that I still need to write about. I have tape, I have interviews with him, I have micro stats on him that I think are interesting, but that once you kind of get into his radius, it's hard to escape him. And that's really, really valuable for a center. And obviously, though, you need to see a little more offense, though. You need to see other elements to his game. But there were promising elements, things that, again, that don't show up on the scoreboard, like I mentioned. Sort of that defensive ability to erase and shadow a little bit that they don't show up in, you don't even really show up in the microstats so much either. They don't show up in accounting stats. So I think he's a guy that does have value. I know a lot of fans weren't thrilled about how he played last year when he came over for Fabian Zetterlund, but there's a player there, though. There's a player there, I think. Okay, so that is our forward group, which clearly needs help. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay, remove this. Oh, oops, I took up the whole screen. Okay, let's no. Gonna add that to stage. Okay, I gotta put in my defense now. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So okay. Sorry. Once again, Keegan's is the brains of the operation. So all right. Let's see. I'm just gonna delete the scene. Let's try that. Okay. And okay, new media presentation. Okay, show on stage. Okay, nope, the same thing. Oh, okay, I got it. I'm a genius at this. There you go. Also want to thank Puckpedia for these nice looking graphics. So so it's not just me, not just my lines on a Word doc with the misspelling, the red squiggly lines underneath for misspellings. But anyway, okay, so this is projecting the Sharks keep all 8 defensemen, which is, I think, possible. And some of these guys you can he can send down. There's going to be injuries in camp, so there's all kinds of things, right? So anyway, though, so this is how I have it lined up, and right now I've got Orlov as the Sharks' number one defenseman, and Orlov is a guy that his game isn't quite what it was in Washington in his prime, but he's still a good, effective player by most accounts, and he's a good two-way player. He is going to play a hard physical game, but he also has puck moving ability, and he is 5'11". He's a very stout 5'11". So I think that if all under 6 foot sub 6 foot defensemen were built like him, they wouldn't have any problem making the NHL. So let's put it that way. I think he's a nice sort of bridge guy. I was under the impression that he was going to be a guy that wanted to go to a contender, and I think that was the case. But I'm not sure if the contracts were quite there for him. And in San Jose, he's going to have a lot of playing time, and so playing time to prove his value if he does go back to market a couple years from now or at the deadline. And he's a good room guy too, so that's going to be he's just going to be a valuable pro for the Sharks to learn from. But with the cautionary of he's not what he was. If he was what he was, then the Sharks wouldn't be getting him for even 2 years. So that's one of the things where just remember that. So, but hopefully he can kind of find a little bit of a fountain of youth with the Sharks too. Maybe all this playing time, maybe playing with Macklin and Will and all that stuff's gonna help him out. So we'll see though. But he's a good bridge guy. He's the best defenseman that the Sharks have had overall since probably Carlson. I think he is better than Wallman. That's my opinion, at least. Some people may disagree, but anyway. So I think this is a good addition, Orlov here, and I have Klingberg with him as his partner. Klingberg is a natural right-hander, and Klingberg, obviously, you may have seen the story. I just put out a story about just all the injury troubles that Klingberg has had. Klingberg talked about having double hip surgery when he was 19 and then at 21 again. And the hips got increasingly worse and worse throughout his career, even though he was able to finish in the top six in the Norris voting twice before he was 26. Very, very impressive. He was on track for maybe a Hall of Fame career. But then the hip pain just was too great for him really to bear. And he had a hip resurfacing surgery in 2023, and he's been feeling better from it. But this is a huge gamble by the Sharks, though. Like I wrote, high risk, high reward. So if you get a healthy-ish Klingberg, even at 32, yeah, this is still a great talent. This is a guy that can really play with the best players in the league still if he's healthy. But I don't know. I don't know if the Sharks will get that guy. I hope they do. There are cautionary tales of hip resurfacing surgery of guys that do well from it, like Patrick Kane. But then there are guys that their career doesn't last too much longer after they have the surgery, like Nicholas Backstrom. And so we'll see which way Klingberg goes. He says he's feeling great now, so that's awesome. Hopefully he continues that. I think that looking back at free agency, I still wonder if the Sharks maybe should have just signed Matt Grzelcyk because I think a little bit safer than Klingberg, doesn't have the injury history and could also help the power play. But the ceiling of Klingberg, though, is higher than the Grzelcyk. So I recognize that part of it. And also, too, Klingberg is bigger and a natural right-hander. Even though Klingberg isn't necessarily going to be the most defensive defenseman, that's not his MO, but he does have size, and he can definitely use that defensively, whereas Grzelcyk comes in at 5'11". So if you're comparing the two, that there's definitely, it's not clear-cut either way, but I think Grzelcyk's sort of floor is definitely a lot safer than Klingberg, and Klingberg just with his injury history. But anyway, though, I understand the move for Klingberg, and if he hits, then Mike Grier is going to look like a genius, and if he doesn't, well, it's not, I guess, a surprise. But then it will leave the Sharks kind of reeling in terms of, well, who are they going to add for their power play? But for now, though, I like the idea of John Klingberg, and so let's hope it works out. So I have Mario Ferraro still. on my defense. So I know that there are a lot of trade rumors out there right now about the Sharks trading a defenseman. I'll get to that in a second, and sort of the trade value that the possible guys that might get moved, what they could be worth out there in the open market. But anyway, so I have Ferraro there. I have him with Shakir Mukhamadullin, and granted, Mukhamadullin is a left-hander, but I thought that pairing did pretty well last year together, and so maybe you give it a chance and see if Mukhamadullin is as kind of comfortable on the right side that he looked at times last year at the end of that season. And I think Ferraro played pretty well too at the end of the season too. So kind of like to see that together and see if between Orlov, Klingberg, Ferraro, and Mukhamadullin that you have kind of a functional-ish top four there finally. You might. One of the things, if you want to talk about, is this team better than last year? You had the top pairing of Wallman and Ceci, which wasn't too bad. It was a fine bridge pairing. Obviously not a top pairing on a playoff team, but the Sharks started off 10, 15, and 5 before they traded Mackenzie Blackwood. Respectable numbers for the Sharks. And that's a lot of it was because of Blackwood, sure, but also because of Wallman and Ceci. Wallman obviously got off to a torrid start last year. But the Sharks were really lacking on their second pairing, if you remember last year, because last year the hope was I think Mukhamadullin could step in and take that job immediately, but Mukhamadullin had a groin injury, I think, during camp. He just wasn't up to speed yet. And so last year we had to see Ferraro and Jan Ruda play together. And I think both defensemen are fine on their own, but not together. You have two guys who don't really move a puck well together. That was really an ugly pairing to watch. And maybe one of the reasons why Mike Grier consistently, when he's talked about the defense this year or this off season, it hasn't been about defending. It's about getting the puck out. Defending, yes, but defending to get the puck out and not just off the glass, but move it to a forward. And so that's something that Mukhamadullin can do. That's something that Klingberg obviously can do, and that's something that Orlov can still do. And so the Sharks are going to should have a much better sort of way about getting the puck out. It won't be as much of a grind to get the puck out of the zone this year. That's how Mike Grier has projected it, or that's how Mike Grier has built it. And meanwhile, though, they've added some credible defenders here in Orlov. And so my third pairing here of Nick Leddy and Timothy Liljegren. And it is worth noting that Leddy and Orlov can play the right side. I think Leddy has played a lot of right side in his career. So if you want to slide in, if you want to switch around, put Mukhamadullin as your left and Leddy on the right, and move Ferraro down and Liljegren. That's Ferraro Liljegren actually is not the worst looking bottom pairing in the league. I guess that's not saying a lot, but that's actually could be a valid third pairing in this league. And so that's another thought too, of flipping Mukhamadullin and Leddy and putting Ferraro down Liljegren. So anyway, though, so this gives the Sharks probably the most credible looking top six that they have had. Definitely better than last year. Definitely better than 2023-24. Even probably better than 2022-23, because that year was obviously top heavy with Erik Karlsson. But anyway, so this is actually not a top six that is horrifying me. Now, Orlov should not be your number one defenseman. I know this, but I don't mind Ferraro Liljegren or Leddy Liljegren bottom pairing. And I think we'll talk about this in a second in terms of the trade values of some of these defensemen. But I would like to see Ferraro kind of on a better Sharks team, better Sharks defense, and not being asked to play 23 minutes a night, and see how he does on a lower pairing. I am a little bit of obviously over the years, a bit of a Ferraro apologist. I like Mario. I want to see him on a better team. I want to see him make the playoffs with the Sharks. He's the guy that obviously has been through it with the Sharks, and it'd be nice that moment for him to experience that when the Sharks really turn it around and he's a part of it. But I do understand that in this roster, and also just NHL landscape that Ferraro is probably he's the most valuable trade chip here, which we'll get to in a second. And also too, but he's not quite good enough that you need to keep him for the next 5 years. I mean, you can make a case for it, but it's not clear cut, right? I get that. I get that. So, but you keep Ferraro though, and Lodgren even too, and you have you have a credible looking top six here. Not, I mean, if Klingberg hits, I guess, and if Mukmadulin takes another step. So a lot of big ifs here still, but I can see this. I can see this. So I like this sixth I'm looking at more than the overall forward composition right now. So I'll say that. And that leaves Henry Thrun and Vinny Diarnay as your number 7 guys, which they're perfectly, I think, capable of doing. I think Vinny obviously very experienced and has played a number 7 role for a lot of teams. And when he comes in, though, he can provide a steady PKing, steady physicality, obviously a great team guy. Henry, we still don't know what he's going to become. He's still just 24, but yeah, he is looking more like a bottom pairing defenseman. Obviously, now he's been very, very up and down with the Sharks over the years. Still hasn't found his consistency. So anyway, so that's why in this grouping that he is left out of it. Obviously, if there's a trade of somebody, depending on handedness, like if it's Lodgren, then right-handed Vinny Diarnay suddenly becomes a little bit more valuable. Or if you trade Thrun off, then it kind of makes things a little, how do you say it? It makes things a little easier to figure out in this group of 8 defensemen. But anyway, though, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But okay, quick aside about the goaltending, and then we'll get to our final topic here, I think. So okay, so in goal we have Askarov and Nedeljkovic, and I am a very, very big fan of this Nedeljkovic trade. And I know some people might say, "Oh, well, there's still guys out in free agency. Why don't you sign Vladar? Why don't you sign?" I think Samsonov is still out there, but I think that everything with Askarov is finding the right personality fit with Askarov, the guy who's going to push him, guy who's going to get along with him, guys like that, right? And I don't know about Samsonov either way on that. I don't know enough about him, but I do know Nedeljkovic has glowing reports as a teammate, as a guy that obviously wants to play as much as he can, but is happy to take a step back for his partner. I think that's really, really important. I think this is why Georgiev didn't work for the Sharks last year, because Georgiev was focused on just being the guy, which you expect him. That's his job, really, right? It's not his job to be best buddies with his partner or whatever. But anyway, that doesn't work, though, when there is the guy, Askarov, on the Sharks. That wouldn't work. And so you need somebody that's a really, really good mentor and that kind of good room presence, all those kind of things, right? That's why I advocated for months that the Sharks should just give stupid money to Marc-Andre Fleury to come out of retirement, give stupid money to Jake Allen to come over here. I think that's worth it. Sharks have plenty of cap space. It'd be all short-term commitments. Obviously, I think Jake Allen's signed for 5 years with the Devils. I would not advocate that, but for the Sharks to sign, though, actually for the dollar figure Allen signed for, it probably would be fine, actually. But anyway, though, that is so important. The stuff that we don't see on the ice, really, between Askarov and his partner is so important. That's why he and Blackwood actually work really well together, because Blackwood was, for whatever reason, as talented as he was and deserves to be a number 1 goalie in this league, but he is a guy that would have been fine taking a step back for Askarov if Askarov was better than him. And so that's really, really, really important in all this. And so anyway, so this is why I like that trade. And yeah, he traded a 3rd round pick, but it's in 2028. And what do we talk about on the show so much? The 3rd round pick is like the $20 bill. Like, yeah, you notice it, right? Like you give it up. You're not gonna give like $20 to like the the Salvation Army Santa, ringing the bell outside of Safeway necessarily, right? $20, like that's a bit much to give to that Santa. You notice it, but if you did give it though, you're gonna get it back too, and so it's worth something. But it's really you're gonna get that pick back. It's not that much in the end, is all I'm saying. That we talk about the premium picks for the NHL draft, they really seem to be obviously the first and then the second. The third, yeah, it's a premium of the non-premium picks. It's the economy plus of draft picks. So you'll get that back. So don't worry about it. Yeah, you'd rather not give it up, but it's okay. So that's how I feel about the Nedeljkovic. That's actually my favorite move that the Sharks made. Well, that was my favorite move before Orlov. I do like the Orlov signing. So anyway, so Nedeljkovic and Orlov are my favorite moves that the Sharks made in free agency. Klingberg, very wait and see. If he hits, then he's going to make the Sharks look like geniuses. If he doesn't, okay. Gaudette, I think, is kind of a nice sort of, not a lot of ceiling there. Just a nice, like, okay, this is a good signing, a good player, good ad. Not a great player, but he's good. Nothing to complain about for a reasonable value. Kurashev is a question mark. Obviously, he is like Klingberg. It's kind of a bet for something. I kind of feel I have a better feeling for Klingberg just because we know Klingberg's natural talent and how really incredible it is. And so even a Klingberg at 90% of what he was is still a pretty incredible player. It just, all of that is just health willing. Whereas Kurashev was putting up points for a pretty bad team. It's 1 year. So I'm just like, well, it's a good gamble, but I'm not sure how excited I am by that. And then with Nick Leddy, finally, just kind of we're just doing a little roundtable of the Sharks' new additions. He's a guy that I think I wrote this in a story. I talked with a bunch of scouts on what Orlov, Klingberg, and Leddy are right now. And if you had added these guys 5 years ago, like these guys could win you the cup. Legitimately, Klingberg was the best Swedish offensive defenseman this side of Erik Karlsson, one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. Orlov was a true two-way monster, a top pairing defenseman. Maybe not a number one defenseman on a Stanley Cup winner, but I think he was number 2 on the Capitals team that won the cup. So just a true sort of just two-way, impacts the ice everywhere. Just great defenseman. And Leddy about the same way too, not as physical as Orlov, but just one of the arguably the best skater in the league. And using that skating on both the offensive and defensive end to make an impact. Now, Leddy is not quite the player he was, obviously. None of these guys are, but Leddy can still skate. That's my understanding. He did not have a great playoff. That's what a scout told me, but he was dealing with a lot of injuries last year. So you get a healthier Leddy. Maybe you have something here. Maybe he's a guy. Again, so these are guys that kind of focus on the downside of them because of their age and the clear decline that they have shown in their games, whether it be through age or injuries. But there is also upside too to these guys. So just in the sense that these are guys that have all been top 4, even top pairing defensemen in Orlov and Klingberg's case. They've been top pairing defensemen over their careers. And so they can tap back a little bit into that these could be nice, really nice ads for the Sharks. Anyway, it just makes the entire defensive group a more professional unit, which is all I've asked for the last couple of years after seeing some of the defense that I've seen the last couple of years. But okay, so before we get to the value of the defense, and are the Sharks a better team than last year? And I'm talking again last year at their best when they had Granlund, Wallman, CC, and Blackwood. I think that they need one more forward addition before we talk about them being better. Their defense is better. Their goaltending, well, Blackwood is a more known quantity than Askarov right now, but we know Askarov's potential. So we'll give the goaltending of Blackwood and Vanacek an edge over Askarov and Nedeljkovic, but it can easily be made up. So I'm not too worried about that part of it. the defense 1-6 down is definitely better than it was than the Sharks at their best last year. And once again, let's not forget that Frau and Ruda was an early season pairing because they just didn't have anybody else to really put out there. I think it was Thrun. I forget who the other defenseman was for the Sharks last year down there, but it was Thrun and somebody. It was not great. That's why they traded for Lodgren, even though that trade didn't quite blossom the way they hoped. But anyway, though, so the defense I think is better 1-6, actually significantly better. And the forward group though obviously needs help there. Now you didn't re-sign Granlund, so okay. So you got to add somebody though of a real impact, a real import to that wing group to make it comparable or better last year. So we talked about that forward group. Too many question marks. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I would say that definitely better if they add another credible top 9 forward. Right now, though, I give last year's forward group and last year's goaltending group a slight edge. Granted, I'm not building in leaps that Will Smith could take, leaps that Macklin Celebrini can take, and leaps that Eklund Graf could make. So that's true. But even with maybe not huge leaps from them, I still tending to favor last year's forward group, last year's goaltending group. Definitely this year's defensive group is better. So anyway, okay. So final topic of our free agency roundup and recap of the last week. And hopefully the last time I go solo, just me talking. I get tired. I need I need a foil. I need some comic anything. Anyway, I need a straight man. I need someone to tell me to shut up. I need a lot of things here. So, okay, let's see. Let's remove the. Okay, that's not good. Too much of me. There you go. Okay. Always got to have our sponsor. Bring hockey this way. No, this way. BringHockeyBack.net. Okay. So the value of the Sharks defenseman. And I checked with actually, I just was interested in this. I just wanted to get a sense of what these defensemen are worth around the league. So I canvassed, and I didn't canvass GMs, so you can take it for a grain of salt, but I canvassed NHL scouts, and these are the scouts that report to the GMs. And so this is how they see the Sharks defense, at least the guys that are mentioned to be available. I think Pagnotta mentioned Ferraro, Lodgren, and Thrun. Elliot Freeman also added Jack Thompson in there. So poor Jack catching strays there. But anyway, so I'm also going to mention Desharnais too. He wasn't mentioned, but I would think that he would be available too. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be available. All right, let's see. Let's take a look at this and also mention their cap hits too, because that matters. All right, one more drink until into the breach for the last topic here. So, okay. So, I think it's clear that the most valuable available Sharks defenseman here is still Mario Ferraro. And I didn't need to check too much into Ferraro because, boy, haven't we talked about Ferraro being a trade bait for the last 2-3 years, right? So I think we have a pretty good sense of his value. His value is not a first rounder. It doesn't look like it, even though the Sharks keep trying to make fetch happen. And it hasn't happened for the last couple of years here. So I think it's a comfortable, we're talking second round here. And from what I understand, last year, the Sharks, Ferraro was available. And I think I put out that they were looking for like a first, maybe a first and a prospect. And it's not that the Sharks thought they were going to get that, but it's like, hey, if you really want him, we don't really want to trade him at this time because we've already traded Jake Wallman. But if you really want him, here it is. They didn't get that because he's not worth that. My understanding is that Colorado also kind of internally kind of chose Lindgren over Ferraro. I think Lindgren went for a second rounder. And so that gives you a sense of his value, that he is valuable, but he is not this free agency class. What Lindgren went for 4 years, 4.5 million. So when Ferraro hits free agency, I wonder if that's sort of a good kind of comp for him. So I think that we're talking again second round pick here. Now the thing about Ferraro though is that it could be worth holding him because trade deadline there is always a need for a defenseman. And I think Ferraro is liked around the league because he has a lot of battle. He's the kind of guy that even though he hasn't played a playoff game yet, that you can see flourishing in the playoffs because he just has that kind of game. He has a game that fits the playoffs. He's not afraid of bigger players. He is deceptively strong. He is good one-on-one. That's Mario's always been Mario's greatest defensive strength, I think, one-on-one defending. And maybe you can see it. You pair him with a better puck mover, which Sharks have been trying to do for years. And then you see something that kind of works there. And he could be a really, I think, big addition for a playoff team on their bottom pairing. And I wonder if with the right partner, if he still can be a middle pairing guy. But I know I've been banging that drum for a long time. It just isn't. I'm trying to make fetch happen there. It hasn't been happening. So I maybe I got to admit to myself that he is what he is. But consensus around the league, though, is that he is an excellent bottom pairing defender, playoff caliber bottom pairing defender. And that's what that has value. That has value for sure. Does it have first round value? I don't know, but it has value. And his cap hit, 3.25 million AAV before he becomes a free agent. It's a little high for a bottom pairing guy, even a good one, but it's a one you can stomach though. It's not ridiculous. He's not making too much. Or much too much at least. So anyway, so that's where I have talking with people. That's kind of if you were to trade Farrell straight up for a pick this summer, that's about what it would come to. A second round pick. And if you hold for a deadline, you can still hope for that late first or maybe, I don't know. If Farrell plays well this year in my sort of reconfigured Sharks top 6, hey, then maybe he can raise his value still. So that I do leave that possibility out there. I do like also too, I as this is the best Sharks defense that I think I've seen right before any trades, at least the best Sharks defense I've seen over the last number of years. It's not a great Sharks defense by any stretch. I'm not trying to oversell it. This defense isn't taking you to the playoffs, but it's the most credible looking 1-6 I've seen. I like to see Farrell in it because he is, without a doubt, one of the Sharks' best 6 defensemen still. So that's faint praise, I know, but I like to see him in a role that is more befitting to him, and maybe he'll really flourish there. I can see a Farrell Lodgegren pairing really actually being very, very good together. I know that they weren't great together last year, but they were basically the Sharks' first pairing or the middle pairing by the middle of the season. And maybe that was a little high for them. I don't know. But a bottom pairing, 16, 17, 18 minutes a night, I could really see them actually kicking some ass there. So maybe I'm a little over optimistic there, but I like to see it. So, okay. So the next question is the next most valuable Sharks defenseman. Oh, I got an interesting text here. Let me add that to what I am going to talk about. Hold on. Oh, okay. Okay, so Timothy Lodgegren, I think. So this was canvassing. I talked with like four scouts, and canvassing them. The Lodgegren is the next most valuable by a hair. So not. This isn't a huge win for Timothy Lodgegren, but anyway, though, Timothy Lodgegren has 1 year left on his contract, and he is at Is he 3.25? I think he's a little high. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Farrell's at 3.25. Lojegren's at 3. And both are going to be UFAs. So, okay. So what I asked people actually was who is more valuable? Not Liljegren and Farrell, because Farrell is clearly more valuable than Liljegren. But who's more valuable, Liljegren or Henry Thrun? And actually, I thought it'd be clearly Liljegren, because Liljegren is also a right-hander, and Liljegren does have proven ability to move the puck, and Liljegren did play. There's how do you say it? A little bit of a curve there, but he did play 19 minutes a night for a Maple Leafs playoff team a couple of years ago, which Thrun hasn't done anything like that. But nonetheless, though, that a couple people actually said Thrun. But anyway, though, so what is Liljegren's value? More people said Liljegren, so Liljegren is ahead here, and also Liljegren's a right-hander. So people were kind of like, well, I got a he's worth a third rounder maybe. He's worth a fourth round, a couple of those more worth a fourth rounder, and so that reminds me that Liljegren, the Sharks traded a third round pick in 2025, not their third round pick. They traded a 6th round pick and Matt Benning for Liljegren last season. So okay. Sounds like you're going to trade Liljegren at a little bit of a loss, but not a huge loss. He's still playable. He is right-handed, and he can move a puck. So there's value in all that. A lot of defensive shortcomings, which is why he hasn't quite found his game yet, and he's not great enough offensively to make up for that. But that's kind of how the league seems to see his value. Okay, so next, Henry Thrun. And what does Henry Thrun have on his side? Well, Henry Thrun is young, a little younger, he's 24, than Liljegren. Liljegren's 26, so he's got that on his side. And general value, though, people were saying, man, maybe a 4th, but maybe more like a 5th in terms of draft pick value. And one source did suggest interesting kind of trade for a Thrun. Thrun could be part of those older prospect for prospect swaps that we see a lot of, like when the Sharks traded a Weisblatt for Afanaseyev, or whatever the Gushchin trade is going to be like. I think that's the kind of trade that I could see with Thrun, that maybe the Sharks can move Thrun for a forward that is about the same age and also out of options. And that could make sense, because Henry, great dude, but his career hasn't. It's not his fault. Sharks have been a really bad team. It's been a really, really tough environment for a young defenseman to become better in, develop in. And I think Henry has tried his best at it. And I think Henry is better than what he was, but has not quite reached the level yet, though, where there is a clearly defined NHL spot for him. And that's also just a style of play, too. A lot of people talk about with Henry, like, well, just what is he? Is he a shutdown guy? Is he a puck mover? And he has not defined himself as any of those things yet, which is fine. He could be decent at a lot of things. That's fine. But the overall impact, though, hasn't manifested itself that this is a guy that, is a top 6 NHL defenseman for sure on any team in the league. But there might be a team out there that likes him and likes his demeanor and thinks that, hey, maybe in a better environment that he's going to blossom into a very, very solid bottom pairing guy. I can see that with him still. So in that case, then again, so older prospect for prospect swap, that could make sense for Henry. Okay, so next up we have Jack Thompson. So I laugh again because I was surprised that Elliot even mentioned Thompson. So that just seemed like, but I guess it makes sense though, of the Sharks prospect defensive pool, right? not going to trade Mukumadulin. Elliot mentioned that, but also, too, they think a lot of Mukumadulin. They're obviously not going to trade Sam Dickinson. I think Luca Cagnoni, maybe he can be had in a trade, but they like him, though. And they want to see if Cagnoni can become a true power play answer for them. And so in terms of sort of that runway and whatnot, that Thrun is obviously out of it. Thrun is not waiver exempt. And Thompson is getting there. Thompson is, I think he's 23? 2019 draft, I believe. Yeah, he's 23. So he's getting there where he doesn't have that runway anymore. I believe he is still waiver exempt this coming year, though. So anyway, my question to the scouts was, who's more valuable, Thompson or Thrun? I think that's a kind of logical kind of comparison there. And what I got back was a little less than Thrun. It was kind of shows you that Thompson, as much as it's always hard to evaluate defensemen, but that's why I like talking with these scouts, because I think they give you a real sense of what these defensemen are worth around the league and what they're worth sort of even in the chaos around them of the Sharks team and team defense and their inexperienced forwards and their older forwards. And just, it's a mess out there for them to deal with. And everybody who watches Sharks understands that it's a mess to try to judge and assess what Mario Ferraro, what Henry Thrun, what Jack Thompson is worth, but you do your best. And I think that by and large, the league has pegged the Sharks defense right overall over the years. So anyway, Thrun is more NHL proven than Thompson. So that's what Thrun's got. But Thompson is right-handed. And also, too, someone mentioned to me that Thompson is a right-handed defenseman with an identity. You know what Thompson is, what he's supposed to be in NHL. He moves pucks. And so that kind of gives Thompson a little bit of value that way too. But nonetheless, we're talking about draft pick value. We're still talking about the same range. So 4th, 5th, maybe more likely a 5th for Thompson. So just want to give you a sense of what Jack could be worth in the open market right now. So finally, the last defenseman here is Vincent Desharnais. And Vinny is a veteran. He is making 1.2. Oh, he's making 2 million. Okay, that's a little high. I thought he was in the ones. I didn't mention with Thrun and Thompson, they're not making a lot. Thrun is making 1 million. Thompson is he's an RFA, but he'll sign for something maybe more to the minimum. So anyway, though, Desharnais is making 2. Okay, so that also makes him another reason why he's the least valuable of these 5 defensemen that I mentioned here. And so again, we know the pluses with Desharnais: size, meanness, good in the room, has some playoff experience. So he is a guy that you can throw out there, and yeah, he can do okay for you in a bottom pairing. He shouldn't hurt you too much. So there are things to like in his game, but it's a very kind of, his game is not a game with a lot of sort of flash to it, right? It's a very simple defensive game. And so I think what the Sharks got for him a couple of years ago, or I'm sorry, at the deadline, they traded a 2028 5th round pick. I think that's what his value is. So he's slightly overpaid for a bottom pairing number 7 defenseman, but he brings a lot of intangibles. You know what you're getting with Vinny when you put him in a lineup. So there is a sort of security with that. Whereas I think with Henry Thrun and Thompson need to go somewhere where they can develop still, where they can get chances to make mistakes and whatnot. Whereas Vinny, he's going to make some mistakes, but he's also going to do some good things for you. And so there is sort of a value to that. So anyway, overall, I think once again, yeah, when I do this exercise, I'm still of the sense of it'd be nice to keep Ferraro. I like to see what he does on a better Sharks team, and he's a guy that's value can increase during the deadline because he's the kind of guy that I can see teams there. Again, they may not give that first round pick that the Sharks have been longing for all these years for him, but they'll give a valuable piece for him because he is a guy that fits into a good team's should fit into a good team's bottom pairing. And So yeah, I think otherwise though, all these other guys again, I wouldn't mind seeing Farrell and Lodgren together to start the season. I think that could be a decent pairing. So I'm probably more inclined to trade a Thrun, a Thompson, or a Desharnais. And a Thrun makes sense in terms of the prospect for prospect swap. Thompson, you can still put in the minors, let him develop another year, and also he's great depth too. That you can kind of shuffle back and forth between the Barracuda and the Sharks. So he has a value to the Sharks. He, in a sense, has more value to the Sharks in that way than traded. So Thrun might be the logical. Oh wait, maybe I'm wrong. I think Thompson might be out of options too. Okay, I'm wrong about that. Okay, well there you go. Yeah, no, I think. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I thought Thompson was still exempt, but he is not. I think so. Okay, well that changes things for me a little bit. So you might have what may end up happening here is you trade a Thompson. Sorry, I'm trying to find my. You trade a Thompson. Oh, I'm sorry. You trade a Thrun. You waive a Thompson. I think Thompson probably passes through waivers. That'd be my guess here. Maybe not, but I think he probably does. And that's probably then you end up with 7 defensemen. And in terms of okay, so last question to kind of tackle here, where we sign off here. Sam Dickinson, obviously. Where does Sam Dickinson fit into all this? And Sam just has to take a job, right? I personally don't. I'm always of a sense of make him take somebody's job, make him take somebody. The Sharks do not have the most intimidating group, right? Of defense. So I think that it's fair to ask Sam Dickinson to take. I'm just reading off left-handed defenseman for the Sharks here. So it's fair to ask Sam Dickinson to take a job from a Orlov, Ferraro, Leddy, Mukumadulin, right? Like in that thereabouts of player. Like these are not premier NHL players anymore, or they weren't to begin with here. So also too, I think it's also important to note too that there's a lot of again handedness flexibility here. That while there's the current 8 defensemen that the Sharks have, Klingberg, Lodgren, and Desharnais, there's only true right-handers. But that Leddy and Orlov can play the right side too. So that could open up a flexibility for Sam. But anyway, though, I want Sam to take that job, though. I don't want it to be given to him, especially a defenseman. I always, again, I'm over conservative about these things. I know. I don't like to graduate prospects too quickly. I don't like to give them jobs, and especially on defense, and especially for a rough Sharks team, that I do believe in protecting defensemen. That said, though, love to see Sam have a good to great camp, and love to see him get his 9 games and see what he can do in that. I have recommended for a while, right, the idea of just keeping Sam around for 2 months and working him in and out of games. In that case, though, you do need to trade. You do need to trade a defenseman here. You are going to carry 8 defensemen probably, but Sam's going to be in and out. And so in that case, then yeah, then you do have to move somebody. And so again, once I think about this, like Henry Thrun, unfortunately, seems like the kind of the logical guy because you might be able to swing that prospect for prospect trade. And right now, the clear top 6 for the Sharks, the 6 best defensemen on the Sharks are Orlov, Klingberg, Ferraro, Mukmadulin, Leddy, and Lodgren. And kind of see what that group can do. Again, not going to take you to the playoffs, but it's going to be the most sort of NHL competent group 1 through 6. Once you remove somebody from that list, then there's more question marks. Like if you had to put Henry Thrun in there, how much has Henry Thrun's game grown? If you put a Vinny Desharnais, well, Desharnais' kind of sailing game is limited, right? Not much of a puck mover there. And so, like for example, like if you did Ferraro and Desharnais together, that's going to look to me first thought, it's going to look a lot like the Ferraro Ruda pairing from last year. So I don't love giving or penciling in Thrun or Desharnais for my top 6 right now, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't want to pencil in Sam Dickinson for that too until I see what he can do at scrimmages when it's not that physical, when it's preseason, which is good kind of AHL action is good approximation of preseason. See how he does there. And finally, in his 9-game sample there, I'd like to see what he does there. So I again, going through this exercise of value. I don't think you're going to lose it with Ferraro. So I know he's the most valuable, but I'm in no rush to trade him. And otherwise, everybody else is sort of a similar-ish value. Lodgegren, Thrun, Thompson, Desharnais. Lodgegren's got more value than a Desharnais, but kind of in the same ballpark thereabouts. But yeah, so wait to see. I think wait to see on Sam. I still think keep the defense as strong as you can, and make Sam take a job basically. So I see no reason to just give him a job. And I don't see any. People talk about don't block your prospects. Who's blocking Sam Dickinson right now? Maybe Orlov is blocking Sam Dickinson. That's it. So if he can't take the job from the guys above him here, then give him another year to incubate, and maybe next year he'll be able to do it. So, all right, I think that's it for me talking at you for an hour and a half. Hopefully, I did an okay job of it. This is again, I prefer having a co-host. So Keegan, wherever you're on vacation, please come back. Hopefully this wasn't too exhausting for you guys to hear me talking for an hour and a half by myself and all my stutters and stops and all that stuff. Sorry about that, guys. I try my best, but that's why I usually have a co-host and I don't do this myself. So anyway, guys, okay, thanks for listening. I think I do think we covered a lot of ground here. So I don't know if we missed anything over the last week or so. And hope you're back next week, and hopefully we're gonna get rolling again with guests, get Keegan back, get the whole machine going once again. All right, guys. So thanks for listening. Let's see what the Sharks do in the next week or so, rest of the offseason. Interested in that, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay, bye.